What's going on, everybody? We are back. Episode number 146 of the Club and Sub podcast coming at you. Maybe we'll do something special for number 150. I don't know. We'll talk about it. I mean, with the amount of losing picks I've been giving out this year, I think we have to do something special for the people. At least you're up on the year. It's been, but anyway.
Yeah, two units marginally, but yeah.
We have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we have UFC Vegas 78, I think is the card that it is. We got Rafael Dos Anjos taking on Vincente Luque. Pretty good fight night card. It's actually continuing a run of pretty solid fight night cards that we've had consecutively here. Yeah, I'm excited for it. Before we get into it, though, we might as well, sift through the wreckage of last week. Actually, honestly, compared to the week before, it wasn't that bad for me. I lost 1.76 units, and I was happy I passed Bouday Osborne ultimately, which was good. In terms of the bets themselves, I don't know. I bet Sean Woodson for a unit. That obviously won pretty easy. Cody Durden, I had a unit on. It's funny. So, I almost feel like after thinking about it more, I should have had my plays on Durden and Tucker inversed. Not just because, obviously, one won and one lost. But, I mean, Tucker had a lot of red flags, 37 off a layoff, whereas Durden we kind of knew was a top 10 to 15 guy who was in his prime. But it is what it is. Yeah, won a unit on Durden. Obviously, that was a pretty good bet. Damon Jackson, I had 1.3 units on him. I don't really, and I'll let you, because I know you had exposure to this fight too, so I'll let you take it away when I'm done. But I don't know how to feel about it, because on the one hand, I did expect Jackson to slow. On the other hand, he slowed down faster than he ever has in his entire career. And it wasn't even like Billy's body work didn't even really start until round 2. So it's not like Billy was having all this offensive success in round 1. So kind of weird, because I feel like it's probably indicative of Jackson just being old. So I don't know if it was a good bet. That said, I didn't really expect Jackson to have dead gassed out, to have as much standing success as he had in round 3. I think it's probably indicative of Billy's kind of, aging out a bit here. Like that was a pretty ugly look down the stretch of that fight. Had 0.56 units on Heoni Barcelos. Again, don't know if it was good or bad bet. It was a close fight. Obviously, Phillips a lot younger, and I think he does some things that bother Barcelos consistently. But I also think it's a close fight pretty consistently, so I'm not sure. Bahamundes Klein, this was a disaster. I had 1.8 units on Bahamundes. Honestly, it's like one of my biggest regrets of the year. Bahamundes was a guy I was pretty vocal about not being a fan of coming into the UFC. I bet McDessie big against him. I bet Roberts against him. And the Roberts fight and the McDessie fight, to be honest, kind of converted me over to, he's probably better than people think. His output's crazy, which is why I bet him here, despite my priors being that I don't like him. And the truth is probably that McDessie is pretty washed, and he lost to a washed John McDessie, and Roberts just isn't that good. Just dumb, betting a guy at juice with less experience who has the defensive flaws that Bahamundes does. Just not a great bet all around there. I also bet 2 units on Gavin Tucker. Again, I don't really know what to take from it. Look, bottom line is the guy's rusty and old, so this might happen on a consistent basis. I saw our boy Evan talk about how, once your shoulder's jacked, it doesn't tend to get better. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. Obviously not the best look. At the same time, take it with context. I mean, it's a minute and a half submission like that. Those things are just hard to really put a number on. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel good about it, especially with the layoff. And then I bet Dustin Jacoby for 1.2 units. And obviously that was a pretty good bet. But again, I kind of similar to my feelings about, the Tucker fight. I think it was a good bet, but also we saw the fight play out for all of a minute and 15 seconds. Kennedy, and I think the best way to put this, the way Kennedy was coming at him so aggressively kind of means if Jacoby doesn't get him out of there early like that, Kennedy's pace probably takes over the fight down the stretch. So again, I'm not really sure how to feel about it, but happy to cash it. Small loss last week. We move on this week. Lags, how was your week last week?
Small loss as well, just under a unit, minus 0.9. So we'll start off, I guess, with the Tucker fight. I played him decision only, minus 150, so that pushed. Kind of similar, kind of thinking was that Lopez win was likely a win inside the distance. And
yeah, that was a good bet.
The under 2.5 rounds in the Wells Harris bet and the Harris fight at minus 170. Only had a unit there. I'm not going to say only having a unit on it and at minus 170, I think that was a good bet. I think it had a ton of chances to finish. Just how the fact that it finished like that, that was a crazy fight. But I don't know. I know. Just what are your thoughts on that fight, at least, in regards to the
I mean, I literally was messaging somebody right before the fight ended, and I was like, yeah, Wells is definitely way better than what we all thought he was. If he can maul people like this. Regarding violence, I don't know. It's kind of weird because obviously if they stand, that looks good. And Wells did have like 4 deep submission attempts prior to it. The way it ended was meme as fuck. It's funny. I was like watching it live. I wasn't even really paying attention. I'm like, oh, he's just going to turn through this pretty easy. And then he was unconscious. I was like, what the fuck just happened?
I was literally sitting there. I'm like, oh, it's dead. It's just absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's kind of hard to evaluate because like there were a bunch of deep submission attempts, and obviously if these guys ever trade for any length of time, someone dies. But in the context of that fight, the ending was fairly mean.
Yeah. Then it had a half unit spread over Bahamunda's round 2 and round 3. At 750 and 1200. Again, he just got tired from early wrestling exchanges. I think they were pretty much dead in the water from the beginning. And then, like you touched on in the beginning, I had the under 2.5 rounds at minus 115 in the Billy Q Damon Jackson fight. Talking about the regression, I would say from Billy Q, I feel like Billy Q should be getting Damon Jackson out if he like as decrepit as Jackson looked late in that fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, not a bad bet. I think 1 unit minus 115.
I don't disagree. It's kind of crazy that like Jackson looked at his tank was on 0 7 minutes into the fight. And then 13 minutes into the fight, he's just landing flush 1-2s on Billy's chin over like not even like no snap, just like full wind up 1-2s and Billy is not stopping them. It's crazy because I kind of felt like when he took him down with a minute left, I'm like, if he holds him down here, he's going to win the fight. you know? Yeah, I agree with you though. I do think I think if Jackson gasses that early at that clip, it's probably finishing under at a pretty high rate.
And then to add the last thing to add on that too, I feel like people like cashing big juice on Billy Q. Like I don't know. I don't understand what
it's
like,
weird though.
Like I'm just saying like you knew he was going to get taken down a ton. So what's the massive edge? Even in round 2, round 3, I don't even think like he looked like some massive favorite.
You want to hear something fuck? So I was at my nephew's birthday party, which is like a 2-hour drive from my house on Saturday. So we got home, the fights were on already, and I went to take my dog out, and that fight was going on. And so usually I'm doing live from my computer, and I saw Jackson after round 1, like kind of put his hands on his hips, and I was like, fuck, I got to check the live price. It was like Billy Q plus 180, and my phone literally froze on me as I was trying to get it in. Really just max pain to the max right there. Yeah. So anyway, we got a big card this week, 13 fights now after the addition of the Blackshear fight. So we'll dive right in. First fight of the night, we got Juliana Miller coming back after losing as a minus 500 favorite. She's taking on UFC debutante Luana Santos. Current price, Santos minus 155. Comeback on Miller plus 135. I think I'm going to bet Miller here. Kind of the point I just made. I mean, this woman, the market thought her physicality was so strong that she deserved to be a minus 500 favorite against the UFC bet in Veronica Macedo. And while I see the reason that people dislike Veronica Macedo, and obviously she's had huge issues in the past, she did have 2 years off and she was training the whole time. Like I thought Macedo showed up in the best form of her entire career. Like she just looked physically a lot stronger than she's ever looked. Her grappling looked better. Her striking looked better. And I'm sure some of that has to do with the fact that Juliana Miller is not great. But at the same time, the market is now taking Juliana Miller is an absolute physical monster who deserves to be minus 500 and saying Juliana Miller should be an underdog to Luana Santos, who's debuting in the UFC. And to be clear, I think Luana Santos looks like a pretty decent prospect, at least from the 6 fights that she's had. It's not many fights. Neither of them have had many fights, but Miller's got a bit more experience. It's what's happened on Tough. But I don't know. Like Miller to me, unless we see again her just get absolutely mugged in the grappling by somebody, my priors are she's got elite cardio. She's very, very strong for the division, and she's got a great process. Yes, she's a terrible striker. Very, very easy to hit. But someone who's going to fight like her and attempt 10, 15 takedowns a fight and has her level of physicality and cardio, that's just a cheat code in WMMA. Am I going huge on her? No, because I will say the Macedo fight was concerning enough to me to entertain the possibility that maybe her physicality is just not that good. But still, there's a fair amount of tape of her mauling like decent fighters to make me think this is probably a market overreaction here. So I'm probably going to take a small poke at her. What do you think, Legs?
Not much, honestly. I think it's a pretty low-level fight. I think it's pretty competitive on the feet. I just feel like Miller's just more or less a bully. Like, I don't think she does anything technically well at all. In the striking, I don't think her wrestling's that technically great either. I think Santos could land takedowns here and could end up controlling her. So, I don't know. I think it's just a close fight. More no interest.
Fair enough. Moving on, I'll stick with you here. We got Damon Blackshear. He's taking on Jose Johnson. Blackshear about minus 180 right now. Come back on Johnson plus 155. What are your thoughts? Oh, no. Blackshear got smashed. He's up to minus 209 now. Come back on Johnson plus 179. What are your thoughts here?
I was going to say, I can't lie. I haven't taped this fight at all, John. Sorry.
Yeah, fair enough.
With the late
Johnson's someone I've been looking to fade just because I think Johnson's got a lot of glaring flaws, in particular his standing defense and his defensive grappling are quite poor. And obviously with Damon Blackshear, you have a guy who's going to grapple in this fight. And who's a bit, actually, he's not even really more experienced, but he's fought pretty good competition and gotten that grappling going against good competition. So with that in mind, like right off the bat, I'm kind of like, Blackshear's probably the deserved side here. But at the same time, I don't know, man. I've had a bad history with Jose Johnson. I don't like how ineffective Blackshear tends to be on the feet. You know, it's possible Blackshear comes out and just mugs him, takes him down right away, rips through him and submits him. And I think that's a fairly reasonably high percentage outcome. But at the same time, you know, Blackshear's had fights where he hasn't gone after the grappling right away or stood at distance. And Johnson is one of those guys. While I do want to fade him, I don't want to fade him with a minus 200 because the dude's got absolute fire in his hands. He's a real hitter. He's very, very dangerous. This is not the fight Damon Blackshear was training for. So with that being the case, I'm kind of okay passing it. But I do think Blackshear, I mean, if Blackshear takes the path of least resistance, he should be able to out-grapple Johnson fairly easily. Moving on, though. Montserrat Ruiz, Jacqueline Emery. I'll throw it to you again, Lex. What do you think?
This should be a fun fight. More or less, I feel like this is two fades in general. Like, I mean, Amarim has a round of gas in general, round of jiu-jitsu. I mean, she hasn't had any success past the round, so it's tough to be like, all right, she should be minus 250 against anybody. But then it's like, all right, Montserrat Ruiz is a head and arm throw. That's, you know, more or less it. And doing that here, I think it's going to cause a ton of issues. I think she should get her back taken. I think her arm's there for the taking. I think an Amarim early sub is probably the best for, again, like later fade equity. But yeah, no, I just no interest in this fight. I feel like it should finish at a good clip though. But it's Amarim doing the finishing, obviously.
Yeah. I actually like briefly considered laying the chalk on Amarim here. And then I was just like, hold on. John.
This is John. Yeah, John. Yeah, come on. Slap yourself in the face.
Minus 245. Like, this is for a woman who you know might death gas passed around. With that said, I do think she's got more upside in the fight than Ruiz does. Emery sub 1 for 11 units. I do like the under here. I do kind of like Amarim sub, even though it's near 50%. But I am pretty confident Amarim gets her down early. Like Samantha Hughes, I trust a lot more than Montserrat Ruiz to stay safe with like a dangerous player on top of her. And even Hughes, she got damn close to submitting her a couple times in that first round. And even past that, you know, I feel like there's going to be some angles this week that say Ruiz live. I kind of just think even Amarim tired, like if Ruiz goes for that head and arm throw, the odds, this is not Cheyenne Velismus. The odds are very strong. She's just going to end up with a body triangle on her back if that happens. Yeah, I think Amarim takes care of her. I don't think the under minus 145 is bad at all, honestly, just because I do think she subs at an absolutely huge clip. And I don't think subs bad either here. Moving on, what a fight. Martin Bouday taking on Josh Parisian. Martin Bouday out at minus 200. Come back on Parisian plus 170. I don't know. There's a part of me that wants to take a small poke at Parisian here. I really just do not rate Martin Bouday. Like there are people who like him, and he's like because he's a huge heavyweight who's good in the clinch and yada yada yada. But I mean, let's contextualize this guy's career. He fought a bunch of bums regionally. He fights Lorenzo Hood in Contender Series, where he literally wins the fight via knees in the clinch. Like that was like knees to the leg. Like that it was an absolutely absurd fight. He then takes on Chris Barnett, who again just mauls him in the clinch. Then fights Lucas Dresky, who is not very good and a gas bag. Gets absolutely pieced up in that fight. Can't pin him down in the clinch. Every time he gets there, he kind of gets reversed out of it pretty easily. And this is Dresky, who is not a particularly good clinch fighter. Ends up scraping a very, very close and controversial decision. And then he fights Jake Collier last fight. And I obviously played Collier fairly large, lost money on it. And the narrative going into that fight was Collier couldn't hang with him in the clinch. The funny thing is, Collier lost that fight because he gassed out. And that was somewhat predictable. But if you actually look at the clinch exchanges, the guy who was winning the positional game in the clinch was Collier all day. He had about 4.5 minutes of control to Boudai's 1 minute of control. Collier just didn't have the energy to do anything. And even in round 3, if he doesn't fail on that takedown with a minute left, probably wins the fight. And so I look at Bouday and I'm like, I don't think he does a ton well. He's very big. He likes the clinch, but he's not a great striker. He doesn't keep an high output. He doesn't have great defense. And now he's fighting Josh Parisian, who I think is worse than Jake Collier. Like that's kind of well, I don't know if I want to bet Josh Parisian. Is Josh Parisian's fucking awful. But
one of the worst.
One of the worst. Definitely one of the worst. But I do feel like Parisian can be competitive in places here. I don't think he's just going to get pinned to the cage. You know, maybe there is the belief to think that he can, just because, you know, to what Pepe said in the chat, the Roque Martinez fight and, you know, the Pogues fight. But Pogues, literally, I don't think you can say, oh, the Pogues fight's age bad. Pogues showed up 18 pounds overweight in his last fight. Like, I take nothing from that fight with regard to his past fights. The Roque fight's a bad look, and that's kind of my concern, because I actually don't think Bouday is that hard to disengage from in the clinch. If you just look at how easily Dresky was getting out of there, if you just like kind of toss his underhook or his underhook, he doesn't do a great job of holding on to it. He's pretty easy to spin out of. I just don't know if Parisian's got that game, but if Parisian doesn't get stuck in the clinch for 7 to 8 minutes, I feel like it's going to be close to a 50-50 fight. I still haven't decided what I'll do with it. I really think Bouday is like very, very overrated. But I do like the GTD here, -110. Parisian's fairly durable. Bouday, I mean, he can be hit, but Boudai's got pretty slow hands. I'm not worried about Bouday putting out like an 100 significant strike effort here. And Bouday seems pretty durable himself. So I think under at -110 is pretty good here. I'm going to probably play that. Over. Yeah, sorry. Goes the distance, not even over.
Yes.
I'm losing my mind.
Yes. I know.
What do you think?
Talking a lot about these big boys here, John. I actually think the juice is probably warranted on Bouday. I actually think he can get Parisian to the clinch. Like I said a little bit there, I think Parisian is one of the worst to do it. I mean, you look at his 2 wins in the UFC, the aforementioned Roque Martinez, again, one of the worst to ever get signed, in my opinion, into the heavyweight division. And then you got Alan Bouday, who got floored in the first round. I just think Bouday can't control him, to be honest with you.
Maybe.
The fact of the matter is, I don't know. I mean, I was gonna say, if he does just end up staying at space here, like he did in the Breschke fight, then obviously it gets much hairier at -200. But
what's the likelihood he lands takedowns? Bouday hasn't attempted. My thing is, I mean, I think he could, but he didn't attempt a single takedown in the clinch against Chris Barnett or Lorenzo Hood. Do I expect him to do it against Parisian? I actually sort of think Parisian, of the two, Parisian's more likely to attempt takedowns, I think.
But I would say, who's more likely to get the takedowns? I would say Bouday in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Bouday gets on top of him, they'll fuck him up. But
right, and that's where I kind of feel like
hasn't shown any interest in going down. Yeah, but Parisian's not. I mean, he's not. I think Parisian can probably work up. But we'll see. I mean, fair. It's an interesting fight, but I do like the GTD. Moving on, Francis Marshall, Isaac Dulgarian. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
Just a lot of unknowns, really. I mean, on the Dulgarian side, 5-0, all first round finishes. He's smashing bums, and it's pretty much the same fight in all 5 fights. Minimal striking exchanges, taking the guys down, mounting them, finishing them. But then the question marks on the Marshall side. I mean, I haven't really seen any tape of him defending takedowns, really, or being held down. So that's kind of tough where it's at, where laying the juice is at. But at the same time, much better striker, much more proven cardio. I honestly think he probably could end up being the better wrestler here, like for the full 15, obviously. And so, yeah, I feel like Marshall Juice is probably decent here, and there's just a lot of unknowns on the Dulgarian side.
Yeah, I am considering a bet on Marshall, and I'm considering a bet on GTD here as well. I'm pretty sure, even though his competition's been very low, that Dulgarian's a good wrestler. Like his entries just seem very fast. He tends to like chain from single to double like pretty well. I think he'll get takedowns in the UFC and possibly even here. To your point, like my biggest question on the Marshall side and why I haven't bet him yet is like he's been the hammer in the grappling so far his entire career. Now, that said, I don't expect this is a guy who's going to be a bad nail, just given how we've seen him dig deep and keep going, but we haven't seen him on his back. Like, is he going to play guard? Is he going to work up? And I don't know. What I do know about the fight is Marshall's definitely the better jiu-jitsu player here. That I know. So it's like Marshall's not a great striker, but he keeps a crazy pace and has elite cardio, seems very durable. Like those are the real knowns in this fight. He's obviously fought better guys. On the Dulgarian side, he's a good wrestler. He's very aggressive from top. His cardio is a huge unknown. My kind of thing here is his cardio could be very good and him still gas out. And by that, I mean, he fights at a pace that is like just so hellaciously fast. There's like the only guys I can really think of who can fight at that pace past the round are like Marab and Colby Covington. I really like can't think of many other guys who will push that pace for minute one and hold it on. So my view is he's probably going to slow down if he fights like that. But at the same time, he knows it's the UFC. It's possible he just kind of restrains it, tries to keep it a low volume outside fight, and just time his entries well here. That wouldn't shock me. But all things being equal, I think you have to assume Marshall's the better striker. I think you have to assume he's got the better cardio, or at least will be the one who's more there bringing it down the stretch of the fight. So I'm considering the spot on Marshall. Just I think it is a decent like buyback on him after being like minus 200 against Gomes. But I also like the GTD. I guess the bear case for the GTD is Dulgarian potentially gassing out and getting finished. And I do think that is a decent, it's a possible outcome. But on the other side, if Dulgarian ends up having a lot of success and it's a close fight, I feel pretty confident Marshall's not going to get finished on the mat, just given his grappling pedigree and that he seems tough. Dulgarian's not just going to pass his guard in the mount and just wreck him there. So I feel like a lot of the finishing upside is on the Marshall side, and Marshall isn't the most proactive guy about chasing a finish. Like even if you go and look at his fight on Contender Series, you know, he had Matthews hurt a bunch and wasn't really actively seeking a finish there. So I feel like plus money GTD is kind of interesting, and I'm kind of interested in Marshall here. Moving on though, Terrence McKinney, Mike Breeden. I could not care less about this fight. There's a part of me that like wants to bet Breeden just on, is McKinney really 60% to win this fight in round one or more? Maybe. I'm not really sure. I think Breeden's pretty bad. He's a tough guy, but Breeden has gotten just absolutely beaten to shit whenever he's faced anyone decent. And McKinney, for all his issues defensively and gas tank wise, he does have a pretty coherent skill set and is a really great athlete. So I kind of feel like McKinney can get to him early and get on top of him, possibly get his back and submit. Obviously, if he gets passed around, it gets interesting. Our friend Gugabe said this because like I feel like this is going to be the McKinney decision. And I could see that as well because it is a fairly sharp step down for McKinney. And McKinney potentially coming out, getting tired, but still being able to land takedowns and sit in guard is something I could believe happening. I'm not betting on it, though. I think McKinney's got the skills. He should get him out of there. But I think, obviously, the best way to play this goes without saying is watch the first round, watch how much resistance Breeden gives, see what McKinney looks like, and maybe bet Breeden live. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think Breeden has much of a chance. I think McKinney can dust them early on the feet. I think Breeden's hittable enough on the feet. And like you touched on a little bit with the decision equity, I mean, he can land takedowns here. So sub early wouldn't be shocking to me either. So should be an easy McKinney win. Get him back on the track, you know. Yeah,
agreed. Moving on, we got Marcus McGee. He's taking on JP Bays. Poor JP Bays, moving up to 135 and taking on a large man here. McGee minus 400 at the moment. Come back on Bays plus 300. What are your thoughts here, Lex?
I know minus 400 is a steep line for McGee. I get it, but the durability for Bays is not there. And so, like, maybe he does have some early grappling success here, but I think McGee puts him out at a pretty high clip. I mean, the guy's getting knocked down 8 times in his last 3 fights.
Yeah.
It's such a bad look.
Yeah, so I really wanted to bet Bays. I told you just before we came on, like on the money line, like coming in, just because it's like kind of a classic fight where McGee market didn't think that much of coming into his first fight, wins that fight by knockout and fairly dominantly. Bays on the other side, the market thought a lot of coming into the UFC was minus 250 against Bruno Silva, was pick him with Cody Durden, and now Bays, after losing to Cody Durden, Bruno Silva, and Montel Jackson, 3 pretty good losses, if we're being honest, is plus 300 to a guy in Marcus McGee, who we have seen struggle a fair amount in the grappling in his regional career. And so I wanted to bet him, but to your point, so here's the thing. Pepe said sub 1 for the culture, and I agree. That is really like the way I think the best way to play this is to play him. If you want to throw like some random submission in there as well, like sure, but Bays, I think, actually has the toolkit that if he had good cardio, could win this fight at a pretty decent clip. Because Bays is a really slick wrestler. He's got great entries. He's got pretty good jiu-jitsu. If he could fight like that for 15 minutes, I actually think this is a winnable fight, even with his shin problems. The problem is he just fights in a very inefficient style. He uses a lot of energy with every takedown he goes for. He's very aggressive on top. And you've seen it every time this guy, goes past a round, he tends to start slowing down in those fights. And here with McGee, it's kind of similar to the Jackson fight where McGee's a big, strong guy. I think he's going to provide some resistance early. So I think Bays will go for it. I think he can get early takedowns. I think he could potentially even put McGee in danger. I think it happens at a decent clip. The problem is if he does not get him out of there in the first 5 to 7 minutes, McGee is probably going to get up, pressure him, and touch his chin and put him to sleep. JP Bays just, like you said, what did you say? Was it eight knockdowns or 5? 8 knockdowns in 3 UFC fights. The guy, and this is like going back to, even the regional scene, Bays, he was a bad nail. He seems to have some quit in him. But yeah, I love the early numbers here. I think he puts McGee in danger at a decent clip and could potentially sub him. What's up, Ryan said he had sub 1 plus 1,500. I think that's a great line. Yeah. Even plus 1,000, I think is a decent line. I think that's a large chunk of his win equity in this fight. So I'll have some of that. We'll root for JP Bays. The guy needs to get a win somewhere in life, right? I mean, moving on though. Josh Fremd, Jamie Pickett. Josh Fremd, huge favorite here. He is minus 360. Come back on Pickett plus 295. Again, it's one where I wanted to bet Pickett pre-tape. Just general thinking, Josh Fremd went off as a big dog to Cedric Dumas in his last fight, and now the market is turning him around and saying, oh, well, doesn't matter. We thought you sucked against Cedric Dumas, who's not very good. Now you're going to be a big favorite against Jamie Pickett. It does feel like a market overreaction to me, but like on taping it, my issue is I think Pickett has the skills to win this fight. Like in a vacuum, like Jamie Pickett's individual skills, his length, his size, his speed, his grappling, I think he has the tools that he could conceivably upset a guy like Fremd. The problem is Pickett is just very panicky. Like if you pressure Pickett and put a lot of output out, he does nothing. Like go watch the Tafon fight. Like every time Pickett let his hands go in that fight, he touched Tafon's chin there. It's like if Jamie Pickett actually had the testicular fortitude to bite down on the mouthpiece against Tafon and let his hands go, that's probably a competitive fight or a winnable fight. But instead, Tafon just kept coming at him and he kind of quit. We've seen it happen with him over and over and over again. The guy's just a really bad nail. It happened with the Tululin fight as well. And so now you have a guy in Fremd Fremd's got some big flaws. The guy is very, very easy to hit. I don't think he's the best defensive wrestler, but the guy's got great cardio, great output, and he's going to come for you. And so, like, I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, if Pickett turned a corner mentally, I think Jamie Pickett can win this fight. But if he shows up as the same Jamie Pickett we've seen throughout his UFC tenure, he's probably going to panic the first time Fremd lands a hard shot and either just run away until the fight is over, like he did against Tafon, or just kind of capitulate and get finished. So I'm probably not going to bet Pickett. I have no interest in Fremd or any of his props. What do you think, Lags?
I think you summed up Pickett pretty well. He's a mental midget, really. His comments are good. The only interest I would have in betting this fight would be the over 1.5 at -160. But
I don't hate it. Like I
other
said,
than
Pickett
that,
might run. He will run from you.
right? Yeah,
It'll.
but he's just such a bad nail that I feel like Frem getting him out of there. It's definitely. I mean, I think he's definitely going to get him out of there. It's just more or less when in that second, third round.
It's kind of frustrating because Pickett's got a huge reach edge here, and Frem is really easy to hit. You know, I just don't trust him to do it.
I guess, yeah, true. And I was going to add a little bit with the market overcorrection from the Dumas fight. Like, sure, he was that massive dog, but like, I mean, should he have been in the first place though? I mean, we talked.
No, of course not. Of course not. I just feel like it's something where, like, market tends to whips, and we'll get to a couple other spots like that on
Right.
this card. But the market tends to
every
whipsaw
week.
pretty hard, you know, on certain guys off of one performance. And that, look, I think Josh Frem is decent. I think he's okay. But Josh Frem is not like coming for the top 15, like ever, you know? So, I mean, the guy got guillotined by Trayshawn Gore. Maybe Jamie Pickett wins by guillotine. Who knows? Pull something out. Moving on. Tafon and Chukwui taking on AJ Dobson. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I talked to you a little bit about this fight before we came on. I lean at Tafon's side, but nothing too strong. I just feel like he's a little bit more busier on the feet. I feel like if anybody was going to get takedowns, I would probably rely more on Tafon. But I mean, I don't think he's going to wrestle. I would just favor him more so in the clinch. The Dobson Petrosian fight for me was just such a bad look. Just he's hesitant to throw the trigger, hesitant to pull the trigger. So yeah, I mean, I lean Tafon, nothing crazy.
Yeah, I guess I'm with you. It's funny. I wanted to bet Tafon initially, and like rewatching the Petrosian fight, I simultaneously was like very disappointed in Dobson's lack of output, but also simultaneously impressed that like he did a fairly good job of like moving his head, ducking most of the really big power shots from Petrosian in that fight. I think he's got potentially better technique than he was given credit for coming into the UFC. Like, I think most of us, we saw him come in. It's like we saw those really wild firefights he had like on Contenders and regionally. I was like, oh, this guy sucks. But he actually looked like a decent boxer to me. Like Evan said it. Yeah. Like I thought he looked okay. What disappointed me the most about that fight is his inability to really have any kind of real grappling success against Petrosian, who I don't think is much of a grappler. But with that said, I still, like you, I feel like he doesn't pull the trigger enough to win this fight consistently. And like Tafon on the other side, Tafon pulls the trigger a lot. That's probably his best skill, as the guy is like fairly high output. And so over 15 minutes, like I actually would disagree with you and say I think of the two that Dobson's more likely to get takedowns here, but I don't think he's likely to hold Tafon down. You know, the one guy to really maul him on the ground was Park, who's just got a much better top game. Plus, Tafon was gassed out at that point in that fight. But it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't think this is going to spend much time on the mat. So ultimately, if that's the case, I favor Tafon on minutes. I do think Dobson's got some like big moment equity, though. He does hit hard, and Tafon is pretty easy to hit. I saw Pepe posted earlier today, but Dobson decision plus 500 is kind of interesting. Like I favor Tafon on output, but I don't think he doesn't hit very hard. So it's like he's going to struggle to really get his margins out there, and like a big shot or two from Dobson or a takedown here or there could swing around. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, all right. I guess I think from that angle, not to shit on the play, but I feel like at that number, I'd rather want like a split decision. I feel like the fight's going to play out more so or less like that. Like if he's going to get the takedown, I feel like it's a close fight on the feet. Like I don't expect like a unanimous decision for him in any capacity.
Do you worry at all about Tafon like coming off those last two performances? Like that was. I mean, the
durabilities looked shaky. I mean, the Mirzakhanov fight. I mean, I know. Well, first off,
fuck that fight.
I feel like first of all, I think a lot of people are remembering that fight a little weird. It was 1-1. Two out of three judges had it 1-1, not 2-0 Tafon. But yeah, I mean, that was just such bad luck too, man.
But Mirzakhanov was also death gassing at that point. Like it was a horrible.
Like that should be an easy fight for him to just close out. Even just
I agree with that.
I mean, yeah.
The worst look though is getting dropped by a jab from Olberg. That's pretty tough.
He hits
But
hard though. I know, but yeah, it's a
and
tough
it's
look
back
from
at
a jab.
85
But,
now. Tafon's back at 85 now, which is kind of interesting. And I do wonder, one of the things that's making me think Dobson could potentially have more success than we think. I mean, Tafon wasn't really even that fast at 205. And I think Dobson actually has a reasonable amount of speed. Like, it might be a pretty decent speed advantage for the Dobson side here. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. Moving on. Polyana Viana, Yasmin Lucindo. I'm going to break Evan's heart here. I bet Polyana Viana here. I don't know. I think Lucindo is one of the best prospects in the sport. I do, but I think her game is incredibly raw and like not chiseled yet. You know, you look, this woman came in as an underdog against Yasmin Uregi, certainly outperformed expectations in that fight, and arguably even won the fight, honestly. And then she fought Brogan Walker, and that's basically her experience in the UFC. And now she's fighting Brogan Walker, belongs nowhere near the UFC. Uregi, it's an impressive performance. Uregi's a decent prospect, but now she's fighting Polyana Viana, and I feel as if the market is expecting like this top level striker, when really she's just a woman who tends to just wing hooks. She does it at a high clip. She's got decent cardio. She hits pretty hard, but she doesn't have a lot of depth to her striking. Whereas Viana actually is a pretty good kickboxer. I will say my biggest concern on the Viana side is she does stand very tall, and I could see some of those hooks finding a home on Viana's chin and hurting her and or finishing her. But I think if that doesn't happen, I actually like Viana striking a bit more than I like Yasmin's. You know, Viana hits the body a decent amount with her kicks. She keeps her jab, her 1-2s like straight. Everything is like right down the pipe compared to the hooks that you're going to see from Lucindo. And I don't think, I know she lost to Hannah Cyphers. Believe me. But Hannah Cyphers isn't a bad boxer. People forget this because of how many bad grappling looks she's had. I'll do a shoey bet with Evan, but then Evan's got to come on stream and do it.
Next week.
I'll do
next
that.
Week,
yeah, next week. But I do think, like, looking at Lucindo, I like a lot of these women who have beaten Viana in recent years have kind of had as an outlet was the grappling, because Viana will play guard. Lucindo is a decent grappler, but she's a blue belt. Like, I think if she goes down to the mat with Viana, it's going to be like wrestling with a shark, and she's going to be in danger of getting finished there. So ultimately, like, I can see the plausibility of Lucindo knocking Viana out here. I think it could happen, just given how Viana stands defensively. But I think Viana, skill-wise, is a bit better everywhere. Can she match her pace? I don't know. We'll see. But I think Viana is going to have a fair amount of offensive success. So I bet Viana plus 165 for a unit. What do you think, Legs?
I lean more so on the other side with Lucindo being the. Well, I like her striking a little bit better, and I think she does probably find the chin of Viana, like you touched on with the upright stance of her. I don't think there's much grappling involved at all here, and that's kind of the big thing with Viana her whole career. Really, she's not a wrestler. She's relying on people taking it down, really. So I think it's largely stays standing, and I like the striking of Lucindo a little bit better. So.
All right, fair enough. Like I said, I do worry about the defense. It is something that is a large concern.
So what are your thoughts on the under? Because my thoughts, I would say, on the Lucindo side, you're pretty much all KO reliant, and then on the Viana side, I'm leaning more so it's whole sub reliant. Not that she couldn't knock her out, but like I lean more so
knock each other out. Honestly, like I agree, Lucindo is a bit more likely to knock her out, but we could have. Who was it that said it on their podcast? Was it Martian? The club and flub, where Lucindo drops her and goes in and gets submitted. That could happen. But I mean, Viana knocked out Rebus regionally. I mean, she knocked Jinyu Fry out cold 2 fights ago. You know, these women, while they're standing, like Viana is about that life. So is Lucindo. They are going to bite mouthpieces. This is not going to be Brogan Walker running away and chucking leg kicks for 15 minutes. Like, this is going to be the two of them biting mouthpieces in the pocket and trying to murder each other. So I could see it. Moving on, though. Khalil Roundtree, Chris Daucus, what are your thoughts here?
Honestly, I think it's a decent fight for Khalil. As much as it pains for me to say with the juice on Khalil, like I don't think much of Daucus, like outside of like he's a pocket boxer, not much at distance, doesn't grapple at all. His chin's a big concern for me, and obviously moving down to 205, I expect him to be much faster. But it's also like Khalil's a pretty fast guy early in fights too. brings the heat, obviously. I could see Khalil knocking him out early. I think I'm not going to say the under 1.5 is a good bet, but I feel like the under 1.5 hits at a decent clip.
I have a small bet on Daucus plus 170. I am not a Chris Daucus fan, to be clear. I mean, obviously, if you've watched the show long enough, you know that. But I do think it's.
Did I lose you, John? John?
Oh,
I think you lost me? John? Yep. Nope.
Do you hear me? I'm good.
Yeah. You froze for about 10 seconds there. Yep.
We've gone through this thing with Khalil where like he's gone from every fight, being kind of undervalued to now he's a big favorite. The thing is, like, even the striking fights Khalil's won recently, like the Jacoby fight, I bet Khalil in that fight. He had no business winning that fight, if we're being completely honest. If you look at, even some of the other fights he's had, like a couple fights ago was the Prochnow fight. The guy gassed after a round and lost. He doesn't have good defense. He's very, very easy to punch in the face. And now he's taking on a bigger guy who's longer than he is, who hits a bit harder than he does, who throws all of his shots straight. And they're in oppo stances. So like the leg kicks of Khalil probably won't be as impactful as they've been at times in his career. And I kind of feel like if you're telling me these two guys are going to swing in the pocket, like how can Daucus possibly be like plus 150 in this fight? Like how? Khalil doesn't have great defense. Neither does Daucus, but both guys have stopping power. Daucus might even have more stopping power than him. Khalil, there's no danger Khalil is going to come out here and wrestle Chris Daucus. Literally zero. So you're talking about a high output fight where the bigger guy who potentially hits harder, who might have better cardio, is the underdog here. And to me, it could turn out that he deserves to be the dog because I do think Khalil is the more skilled kickboxer of the two. But to me, it's like you have to have a bone on Daucus here just in case he knocks him out. Like, I know he's coming off 3 straight knockouts, but it's like Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades, Jairzinho Rosenstruik, all nuclear hitters. Like, prior to those fights, people were talking about, Chris Daucus, like this was like some heavyweight contender, Now he's an afterthought and he's plus 150 against Khalil Roundtree. To me, it's just, I think the fight should be closer to pick. Maybe slightly in Roundtree on him having more kickboxing tools, but I'm expecting these guys to bang it out. I'm expecting someone to die. And if someone doesn't die, I trust Daucus a bit more to kind of continue to like be able to land down the stretch here.
So while Jairzinho, obviously I'm not going to disagree. He's a nuclear hitter. The dude is so low volume, like traditionally, and he will stand there and that, to me feels like a great fight for Daucus, except
I agree.
Rosenstruik just went bat out of hell early in that fight and just bonked him. Absolutely just face plant, basically.
I agree.
Unbelievable.
But we'll see. Moving on. Cub Swanson might be the final ride for Cub here. He is facing Hakeem Dewodu. Dewodu's minus 210. Swanson's plus 180. What do you think, Legs?
So first of all, I did, to touch on that point a little bit, I did look up, see if any rumblings of retirement. Haven't found anything.
It should be his final ride.
It should be. And that's kind of my big thing. He looked just really bad against Jonathan Martinez. And I feel like a guy in Hakeem who's just gonna hammer the leg kicks. He's got decent strikes on the feet. Obviously, I'm not gonna say like great power, but I think this is a fight like we touched on earlier with the takedowns of Bouday. I feel like this is a fight where Hakeem could find a finish himself. So, yeah.
Yeah. I really don't want to lay minus 200 with Hakeem, but I have been considering potentially taking a poke on like under an Hakeem KO. I wish the KO price was bigger. Plus 160 is not great. It's really not.
Yeah.
I will say I'm not betting Hakeem. I'm not going to do it. I am not going to bet the guy with like half the experience who's fought way worse level of competition here at minus 200, who also looked horrendous after missing weight in his last fight. Actually, if he comes in on weight and looks great, maybe I'll think about it. But even then, I probably won't. But I will say this. I do think Cub is pretty much done. The Martinez fight, I could forgive going down to 135 at 38 years old. Like, that was not going to end well. But, like, take that fight out of the sample. And he looked decrepit in that fight. But take it out of the sample. And what do you have? He KOs Darren Elkins. Very easy to hit. It was a great fight for him. He dies to the first kick Giga throws. The fight before that, Daniel Pineda is kicking his ass, and then Daniel Pineda does Daniel Pineda things and gasses out. The fight before that, Kron Gracie, at the time, everybody was like, oh, Kron Gracie, maybe a better striker than we thought he was, because he brought it to him. Turns out Kron Gracie's fucking horrible. And Cub maybe getting old. Fight before that, split with Burgos. That was a decent performance. But the fight before that, Renato Moicano drops him with a jab, finishes him on the mat. Fight before that, Frankie Edgar looks horrible. The point that I'm making here is he has been fairly clearly regressing for years now, and now he's 39 years old, and he's taken on a guy in Dewodu to your point, Lags. Cub hasn't dealt with kicks well at all in recent years. Dewodu's going to rip kicks. He's a fairly sharp counter striker, and so if it's true, if I'm right, that Cub has lost a step, Dewodu should land hard on the counters here. Again, the big fear with Dewodu is the Erosa fight, but I think I said this to you earlier in the week. Like Erosa, if you don't kill him early, the man is a fucking axe murderer. He comes at you 100 miles an hour for the entire fight, throwing knees, elbows, like huge shots and grappling. And we're not going to get that with Cub against Hakeem. Hakeem is not going to have to think in the manner that he had to think against Julian Erosa. Cub's going to try to give him a beautiful fight, and that's the kind of fight Hakeem excels at. So yeah, I think Hakeem's going to take care of business. I like the KO 2-3 here. I kind of like the under, though. I don't know. I don't know how much finishing. How alive do you think Cub is to finish here?
That's what the thing. I don't think he has much finishing. I mean, I guess you could say like, I wouldn't even say that. Like, I feel like his best path is probably a close decision.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. What is his decision, actually? I'm actually kind of interested. I'll pull it up for you. Plus 325. That's not even that good. With a plus 180 money line.
Yeah.
It's not great. All right, moving on. Throw it to you first here. Main event of the evening. Rafael Dos Anjos taking on Vincente Luque. Dos Anjos minus 120. Luque plus 100. What are your thoughts?
Great main event. And then otherwise, I think, fight night card, honestly. But
it's not bad.
I know. I should say
we've had way worse this year.
That's true.
From a betting perspective.
From a betting perspective, that's what I mean. Fight's good, but I think this is RDA time. This is a great fight for RDA, and I feel like a lot of people are thinking the opposite. It's a good fight for Luque, but I think the only way you could think that is if you think it's a massive blowout on the feet, which don't really know how you could come to that conclusion. The durability of RDA is still there, still a great striker. So I think it's competitive on the feet and massive grappling upside and cardio for RDA. So minus 120 for RDA seems like an absolute steal.
I bet RDA for a decent amount here. I got 2.5 units on him. I'll be honest, I am a bit nervous about this line movement. It's really kind of freaking me out because like everybody we talk to who is good at this likes the RDA side in this fight. And someone on the other side is keeping that line down at, minus 120 right now. Which has me.
I was going to say, it did shoot up a little bit to 140 at one point earlier.
It did. But now it's back to 120, and RDA is 38 years old, which is a concern, and he's back at welterweight now. With that said, I do think, there's as much, if not more danger that Luque shot as RDA. I mean, look, do I think RDA will KO him? Probably not. But the fact this guy had to take a year off because of brain bleeding is concerning. And it's something I can maybe throw out if that was like the first fight where he'd taken an absurd amount of damage. But I mean, this fucking guy's been taking damage.
It's every fight.
It's every fight. Years and years. And like he's taken damage to some not very good fighters, like Nico Price absolutely went to war with this man and almost killed him. Tyron Woodley bit the mouthpiece and landed hard on him. Mike Perry. It's funny because if you go back through his wins, like his best win maybe ever is Chiesa, who basically just got too aggressive and got caught in a choke. He beat Woodley. He beat Randy Brown, who just couldn't check kicks. He literally was going to war with Nico Price when he knocked him out. Got destroyed by Stephen Thompson. Arguably got robbed Mike Perry. I mean, that is rough.
I was going to say, out of that whole stretch, sorry to cut you off. I feel like that whole stretch, I feel like the Randy Brown fight probably was his best performance.
Yeah, it was either that or, in the aggregate, I agree. I mean, he fought Derek Krantz on short notice, who's a bum, who almost knocked him out immediately. Brian Barberina was literally 16 seconds from winning that fight on the cards before he got knocked out. You know, like the point that I'm illustrating here is Luque, he doesn't have a lot of great wins. You know, he's got some decent ones, but every time the guy has taken a step up in competition, he's gotten beaten up pretty badly. And now he's here fighting RDA. And look, I suppose Luque's best path is on the feet, but the leg kick's one of his best tools. And with opposite stances, it's probably not as impactful here. RDA is just a much safer and much smarter defensive fighter than Luque is. Like, I think he should be able to outland Luque standing. And yeah, this is like my feeling, what Pepe said. It feels like RDA's fucked with the Akalai movement here. It does. Like, we know a lot of smart people who are all on the RDA side, you know?
I know, literally, it's funny. As soon as after you were talking about that, like, the line looks fishy in this side, I literally went to RDA's Instagram. I'm looking at him. I'm like, all right, looks good. Looks all right. Nothing out of whack. We're all right here.
But then, like, even the grappling, we saw what Bilal just did to him. And Bilal's a good wrestler, but RDA on top is a lot better than Bilal is. And yeah, so I feel like RDA has every advantage here. He's fought the better strength of competition. He's got better wins. He's got a great stylistic advantages here. The big question is he's old, and he is old. And there's been a very, I think so too. He should win this fight. He should win this fight. But I'm nervous. I got to be honest. It might just be that I'm scarred from like the last 2 months of just getting my shit kicked in part. But I do think it's smart to not disrespect the line movement. You know, I did this a couple weeks back with Holly Holm where instead of just being happy with my 2.5 unit bet, I decided I was going to add to it. And I was like, oh, you know what, the line movement, fuck that. I don't care. And that was obviously a disaster. So
two last things to add there. Well, one with the line movement. I feel like people in general do like Luque though. Like the public sentiment, like people like Luque.
That could be. I mean, it's not. I have seen some people on the Luque side, but
like not to compare them like side by side in general, but like in terms of like public favoritism, like a Punahele Soriano, like people love him. People always bet on him. He's big, powerful, hits hard. This and that. True. Like I feel like comparable in that sense.
And Luque's only been an underdog once in his career, I think.
Yep, and that would be this fight.
The Chiesa fight.
No, it's this fight. I thought.
No, prior to
they were saying this one.
Prior to
this. Okay.
Well, maybe he close fave against Chiesa. That's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. I'm trying to think about it. I'm pretty sure all you guys bet Chiesa at like plus 130, plus 135.
That was fucking sick. I don't want to talk about that.
I know. I'm sorry.
That
is
sorry
to bring it up. I'm pretty sure Chiesa was a dog there.
I'll tell you right now where he closed in that fight. Luque against he did close his favorite, minus 108. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So every fight in his career, he's closed as a favorite or pick him. So.
And then the last thing that when you talk about like the good wins, even that, it's like he's not even having great dominant striking performances, which he kind of needs to have here. Like, he's not having any blowouts on the feet. Like I said, the Randy Brown fight is the biggest blowout he had on the feet.
Yeah. No, and that was just Brown couldn't check a kick. I mean, that was literally the entire fight. I don't disagree. RDA has all the tools to absolutely own Luque in this fight. He really, unless his durability is just like sapped, you know, like he should win this fight. But we'll see. We will see. I'm a bit nervous about it. I was honestly expecting this to be like minus 200 RDA. But I really like, you know, prior to the line coming out, I was expecting RDA to be a pretty decent sized favorite in the fight.
Early, like I think on Sunday when I was looking at it, when it was like minus 125, minus 130, I'm like, all right, I got to look at that one a little bit earlier. Like, all right, RDA is probably going to steam out to like 150-ish. It'll close around there type of thing. And then like Monday, I'm like, all right, line's staying about the same. I'm like, all right, I'll get to it a little bit later.
Then again, reverse CLV is the new meta. You know, it's funny. The last 2 months, which is the worst 2 months I've ever had betting on fights, I have never beat the market by more than I have in these 2 months, and I've never done worse. Obviously, some of that's coincidence and being unlucky, but I mean, it is, I think, true that the market movement in MMA probably not as predictive in most other major sports where it's moving on huge volume, as opposed to MMA where two $20,000 bets are moving a line 40 cents. You know.
Yep.
So
agreed.
But anyway, we're rolling with RDA.
Yep.
We're gonna hope it's not spooky. Yeah.
You got a shoey bet.
I have a shoey bet with Evan. Evan's gonna get his ass on here next week if
win or lose. Win or lose.
Win or lose. Yeah.
On next week.
Yeah. But yeah, guys, thanks for checking it out tonight. We have a great card to break down next week. We got UFC. What is it? 292? Is that what it is?
Yes.
UFC
Sterling O'Malley.
292. Our boy Aljamain Sterling taking on one of our other boys, Sean O'Malley, but it's Aljo season. I mean, not going to lay the price, but it's Aljo season. Great card. I'm excited to break it down. We'll be back same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Didn't drop the plug in the beginning. If you like the show, drop a like, subscribe, comment, share, all of that. I promise you, by September 1st, I will have us on Apple Podcasts. I will finally get my lazy ass in gear and get it taken care of. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. Good luck on your bets this weekend. You can follow me on Twitter at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags. Good luck on your bets. Take it easy. Peace.